Eventually, we're going to keep adding more cameras to Starship, get a couple of different views from the outside of all the different areas, and then also eventually to be able to see payloads once they're deployed. So a lot more exciting stuff coming up in the future. But right now, we're getting closer to reentry. Again, we're going to be moving at hypersonic speeds at more than 5 times the speed of sound. We're going to see that plasma start to build. So, Kate, Jesse, excitement coming up.
Yeah, as you can see with that view on your screen, again, high def brought to us by Starlink. We can see the plasma beginning to build as the ship is getting closer to the Earth's atmosphere. Now, let's talk a little bit about how Starship will survive reentry, hopefully, and control itself.
Exactly. We've been talking about this entire flight test. There's 18,000 hexagonal ceramic tiles surrounding the bottom portion or the Earth-facing side of the ship.
Through 100 kilometers altitude, good altitude for entry.
Great call-outs there. Now, during atmospheric reentry, the vehicle is going to see temperatures as high as 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit or over 1,400 degrees Celsius. So those tiles are there to help protect the vehicle from this extreme heat.
Yeah, and the flaps will help control it. Now, one noticeable difference I see immediately, those flaps are not moving as much as they were on Flight 3. So that is a great sign, right? We had unplanned loss of roll control on Flight 3, so we added some additional thrusters, and we can see that they're working well, and we have a much more stable view. So those flaps, there's 4 of them, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. They're made out of stainless steel. And yeah, they help steer the ship, which, as we can see, the plasma continuing to build. Now, if the ship survives reentry, it will have to perform a flip maneuver as well as a landing burn. We saw this demonstrated in a couple of high-altitude flight tests back in like 2020, 2021. Similarly,
temperatures increasing on the nose within expected ranges.
Great news there. It sounds like the temperatures that we are getting during this point, which again, we usually don't get during spaceflight because of this plasma. We're getting this live. This is a great news. So similarly to, for example, the serial number 10 test that we saw a couple years ago, we're hoping to duplicate that again today. Hopefully we will see it live. And basically the 3 center engines of the ship will reignite and gimbal or point to help flip the ship until those engines are pointing down so that it can land vertically using Raptor's thrust.
And as you can see, even from the beginning of the program, we've designed Starship to land on Mars where there are no runways or other humans to help out. We also want rapid reusability, so we're doing...
The vehicle is passing through 85 kilometers altitude. The flaps have control of the vehicle.
Great news. Flaps have control of the vehicle. That's exactly what we want to hear for this flight test.
Yeah.
Again, we are going to be doing a propulsive landing instead of a more traditional means like parachutes. And we are expecting reentry to begin here in just about a minute. Reentry, an awesome view that we have here.
Starship remains on a good entry trajectory.
This is the same view that we had when we first returned from the coast phase. Again, this is looking at the side of one of the flaps. It's incredible that literally at the bottom of this picture, we're basically looking through plasma, which is just absolutely mind-blowing.
Wild, very wild. Now we are expecting entry to begin here in about 30 seconds or so. Entry to splashdown is expected to last about 6 minutes long. And that flip maneuver should occur around about 10 minutes before splashdown. And such incredible views that we're getting.
Approaching peak heating region.
Great call-outs there.
Yeah, these views are absolutely astounding.
Nose temperatures continue to rise within expected region.
And in your bottom right-hand corner, you can also follow along with the altitude of ship as it's returning back to Earth.
So once again, this view is basically looking down into the plasma blanket that is building up around the exterior of Starship. It is traveling, as you can see on your screen. You can look in the bottom right-hand corner and see how fast it's going, how high it is, as well as the general orientation. Again, we're seeing a lot more stability, a lot more control here on this flight, which is great. It shows that the iterations, the learning...
Starship is now in expected peak heating region.
All right, great news there, telling us that this is basically the hottest point that Starship should get during its reentry. Now, the heat shield is working with the atmosphere for some free braking, okay? The atmosphere is helping to slow the Starship down.
Yeah, exactly. We're not using any engines or thrust to slow the vehicle down. Exactly what Kate mentioned. We're just using the atmosphere and those heat shield tiles protecting the vehicle as it's coming through that high heat temperature.
Yeah. Now, this is another one of those moments that we have been waiting for. Right now, the ship is currently re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, and by all looks and all call-outs that we're hearing on the net, it is doing pretty well. Now, we do not plan to recover the spacecraft today, but rapid and reliable reusability is the ultimate goal.
And just pausing to just take in this incredible new and different view that we're seeing. We did get a similar view in Flight 3, but again, the vehicle did lose a little bit of its control, attitude control, and this is a very stable view. This is great. This is exactly what we want, and we are hearing that we're getting expected call-outs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Starship is seeing half a G of acceleration, remains on a good entry trajectory.
You know, it's incredible to look at this photo and wonder, wait, is it real? Is it frozen? We can see so I was just going to say
Those temperatures have stopped increasing.
Oh, that is great news. The temperature is no longer building. But I was saying, we have a little bit of indication there. We can see that streaking that occurs and tells us that this is indeed a true view. So once again, we are looking basically through the plasma that is building up around the exterior of the ship.
And I still cannot get over that we are getting a live view of reentry right now, live on your screen. Again, we've said this over and over, but all thanks to Starlink. We are able to use Starlink in space, which we're getting this incredible data. And not only just the data from the sensors, but getting live imagery of what is actually happening, which is great, which we've never been able to do live before.
Right. Now, just a quick future outlook here. So in about, at T plus about 1 hour and 2 minutes, we should hear a call out for entry transonic. That means that the ship is going near the speed of sound. And then about a minute after that, we'll hear another call out saying entry subsonic, meaning that the ship is going below the speed of sound. So these are all continued indications that the atmosphere, right, as the ship comes back down, it is getting through the more dense part of the atmosphere, and that atmosphere is helping to push against the vehicle, and those heat shields are protecting the vehicle during this high heat period.
Yeah, Kate and Jesse, we're starting to see as the atmosphere gets denser, you're starting to see a few more particles make an appearance in the plasma there. You can see you're looking down at the aft end of the ship in the top left, and you're seeing essentially the flame build up as we go through reentry. You've been hearing the call-outs. They're tracking things like temperatures in the nose cone, and those were right where we modeled them to be, which is really cool to see and to see in real time. But we're coming up. We're at about 67 kilometers in altitude. Our last signal with the ship on Flight 3 was at 65, so we should be making it past that point shortly. Obviously, as you guys pointed out, we're in a much better control this time as we re-entered in the right attitude, and our flaps have been steering the way so far. Once we get through transonic, that's when you've got essentially
Raptor landing bird.
Different areas around the vehicle where the air is either moving faster or slower than the speed of sound. We'll eventually get to subsonic, which we have some experience with. We did in our suborbital campaign.
Start of Raptor chill.
And Starship will eventually get down to its terminal velocity as it's floating down to the water. That's just about 200 miles an hour or so. We are hearing that we're starting to chill some of the engines as we are, if we make it all the way down to the water, still going to attempt a landing burn, but still a ways to go. We're at about 64 kilometers in altitude right now. We made it through what's expected to be the peak heating, but now we're going to start encountering increased pressures as the atmosphere gets thicker and thicker. So we're at 63 kilometers, so we've already made it farther than we did on our last flight when that last signal was coming at 65 kilometers. So again, what we're really looking at here is the performance of the heat shield, of the flaps, of the seals in the flaps. There's just a whole bunch of different areas that we're keeping a really close eye on as we re-enter.
Starship remains on a good entry trajectory.
And looking like we're still on a good trajectory. If you're seeing little camera moves, that's the flap moving as it continues to maintain the attitude of the vehicle as it re-enters. And I mean, not just camera views, but we've got sensors inside the ship. We've got those sensors down at the very aft end of the vehicle where we pointed out we had some intentionally missing tiles, where we've got some sensors looking at just how hot it's getting around there. We intentionally put those in essentially the least critical part of the heat shield, where if you had any kind of a breach, it wouldn't be great for reusability, but wouldn't be critical for actual making it through the re-entry into the landing. "58 kilometers, we're continuing to descend. Again, right now we are over the Indian Ocean. We're actually getting closer and closer to that expected splashdown point, which is just to the off the northwest corner of Australia. And if you keep an eye on our speed, the speed is dropping. We're hitting the thicker part of the atmosphere now. The speed's going to start dropping precipitously. We're going to start getting to transonic pretty soon, and then after that we'll get into subsonic, where we're moving less than the speed of sound. But wow, what a light show so far!
External temperatures are starting to come down.
Again, this camera view is looking right at one of the forward flaps. And we're strategically putting some cameras around the vehicle to just look at the different areas that looks like we got the flap starting to come apart a little.
Yeah, it does appear that we have a little bit of burn through there. We can see pieces of the vehicle flying off. What a show it has been. It's been like watching Interstellar or something.
This is wild to see this, but the ship is still coming down, which is incredible to see.
How far can it go? That is the question.
Keep your eye on the altitude in the bottom right-hand corner. We're at 54 kilometers right now.
Now, ultimately, the data is the payload today. We've been saying it multiple times. Our teams are sitting, reviewing this data live, learning where the hot spots are. As you can see, there's an obvious hot spot there with the flap, and learning how we can improve this design. The goal was to get as far through this high heat re-entry as possible. Ideally, we'd love to make it all the way down and perform that landing burn and flip maneuver, but we may not get that far today. We will see.
Again, this is a test, and we are gathering as much data as possible, visual data as well, which we can see here. We are getting a lot of debris covering the camera on your screen, but we can still see some of those sparks and flames from that high heat as ship is making its way back down to Earth.
Ship now at 50 kilometers and closing. The good news is we still got, looks like that camera lens just cracked. It's safe to say ship's getting a little beat up, but that's to be expected on a test flight. We are still learning how to improve the ship for total survival and recovery of the high heat re-entry.
I'm honestly impressed that we're still getting this live view despite how much debris is coming off of this flap right now.
The fact that we've got it is good news. And I may have jinxed it. I apologize. Look at that. It's back.
We are still going.
And the teams here at SpaceX are excited, as you can tell by the cheering behind us. There's still a sizable crowd here at Mission Control Center, Hawthorne.
A splashdown is expected in just about 4 minutes from now. And we're still moving. We still have live views. Starlink is doing an incredible job.
Maximum entry dynamic pressure. External temperatures are dropping.
Okay, good news. Those external pressures are dropping. The question is, how much of the ship is left? We can't really tell. We can still see some of that particulate coming off. And unfortunately, we do have a cracked camera lens. But for any photographers out there and videographers, we know that's part of the gig sometimes.
Yeah, and you can see that the speed is rapidly slowing down. That's actually really great news for us. We want the vehicle to be slowing down before it splashes down into the ocean. That'll help set us up for that flip maneuver, engines first down into the water.
Exactly. So we have seen this flip maneuver demonstrated on previous high altitude flight tests like serial number 8. Oh, more views. Or excuse, I should say, more light coming through the view that we have through that cracked and dirtied lens there. But yeah, so we're hoping that this flip maneuver, that we can pull it off as soon as we get those views back. If we can get them, if the ship is still around, we will bring it back to you.
Vehicle has passed maximum dynamic pressure.
That is great news. Maximum dynamic pressure being the moment in which the vehicle experiences the greatest amount of aerodynamic pressure. Speed still dropping. We're now at 37 kilometers above the ocean. Just like Flight 3, we are targeting a splashdown in the water in the Indian Ocean.
And we don't have a live view right now, but because we're still getting data and telemetry, that does tell us that ship is still doing okay, at least. And there we got that live view back. The crowd very excited to see that view, despite not being able to see very much.
The fact that it's there tells us the ship is still alive.
Yes, and collecting data, continuing to collect data as we get closer and closer to Earth.
Yes, now 30 kilometers, now 29 above the Indian
Starship
Ocean.
is at 30 kilometers altitude, Mach 2.
Sounds like the vehicle's traveling, as we just heard, Mach 2, which is, looks like we might, I thought maybe it might clear up. It is a little bit, now at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes and 13 seconds into Starship Flight 4, hoping that the ship can hang on. It's probably potentially hanging on by a couple of bolts and threads, but it's still going, and that is excellent news.
That deceleration is looking incredible. We're about to go under 1,000 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
Starship is at 20 kilometers altitude.
Now, keep in mind that even though we can't see anything, the data itself is what we really are.
Starship is subsonic.
Subsonic, they're telling us it's traveling below the speed of sound. That movement means the flaps are actuating. I think we can see something. This is a nail biter. But we are, unfortunately, we can't see through the lens, but we're still getting the feed. Starship is now 11 kilometers over the ocean. All this data is incredibly important, even if, it breaks up right now. Okay, we can see that flap actuating through the glass.
Starship is passing through 10 kilometers altitude.
Okay, the next milestone will be initiation of the flip maneuver and landing burn. Keep an eye on the bottom right corner of your screen for those 3 center engines to relight. They will gimbal or angle so that the ship flips itself back up vertical and hopefully lands in a vertical position.
And the crowd is very excited to get this view of that flap still
Starship
maneuvering.
is passing through 5 kilometers altitude.
This is incredible. We're getting very close to splashdown.
These fireflies are such a good sign of life right now. We wish we could see more, but we'll take it.
Starship is at 2 kilometers altitude, terminal velocity.
Landing burn startup for Starship.
All right, good news there.
Nominal chamber pressure.
Landing bird startup.
Starship is in landing burn.
Landing burn shutdown.
The landing burn shutdown was commanded